Welcome back, nerds. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Maddie. If you're new here, I hope your day is going well. Of course, now someone is messaging me. So from the title of this video, you may or may not know what we're going to talk about today. Namely, we're going to talk about Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, but this is a more all-encompassing video that I kind of just want to touch on a few subjects, and I just want everyone to know I'm not attacking anyone in this video. I am not coming for anyone. I just want to talk about my thoughts and feelings on a recent Twitter-ish drama, but I also want to talk about YA in general, and I just thought it would be kind of fun to do it this way. So, recently, a very large creator on this platform made a tweet that basically insinuated that Six of Crows is about as deep and dark as Adam Levine is edgy. And honestly, this creator, Daniel Green, I thoroughly enjoy his content. I have made a couple of spoof videos that have made a few people a little bit annoyed that were inspired by his content, but I really do enjoy his content, and I honestly liked this tweet, thought it was funny, and then circled back when people were subtweeting the shit out of him. Which, you know, is book Twitter. It's a thing. If you're not on book Twitter, you dodged a bullet. But basically, I wanted to go over kind of my thoughts about this particular discourse and kind of go over some of the things that he said in his videos about YA. Daniel has definitely said multiple times that he's not a YA reader, and I thought it was interesting that he would make these videos in the first place. I had a beer. There we go. Not that I need to give a backstory to who I am as a reader, but I was a young adult reader for many, many years, have now become much more of an adult fantasy reader, and I feel like I have the perspective on not only reading, but as well as book selling. I was a children's lead for Barnes & Noble for a couple of years, so I definitely know the marketing strategies behind the YA industry, basically. So I want to kind of break down what I feel like is interesting about this particular discourse, as well as what I think that maybe was missed in the communication about some of these books, basically. Would I consider Six of Crows deep or dark? Honestly, if a book has a scene where a man's eyeball gets yeeted out of his skull, I don't know how it's not dark, but that's just me. I also do agree with a few points that Daniel made in his video that namely, young adult protagonists are not usually morally gray or in any way like an anti-hero. I think the only one that I honestly remember is like Artemis Fowl, but that is specifically middle grade, which I'm going to touch on later. And that is a character that I, as a younger person, did not like. So I think there is a definite reason why we don't get morally gray characters in young adult. And then he also touched on the pros of young adult. Now, when I read Game of Thrones, I was a senior in high school, and I immediately could not read any more young adult because of the pros. I can definitely say that there is a marketing schematic pushing through mediocre to poorly written YA right now, and it is something that's frustrated me because I feel like we could be asking our publishing industries to promote really well-written books, even if the writing style is a little bit younger, but we're not really seeing that, and that is something that a lot of young adult readers have an issue with right now. And when I say young adult readers, I'm not saying young adults, I'm just saying anybody who reads young adult. And I'm really wondering if I'm gonna get more hate comments for saying that I read young adult than Daniel did, but we'll see about that. I know a lot of people are like, why would you read young adult? You're not a young adult. And I will say, first of all, go fuck yourself. Second of all, go fuck yourself. So moving on. Wow, Maddie. Okay, I didn't plan this video very well. The third point that Daniel made in one of his videos about young adult is that there is a pervasive amount of romance in young adult right now. And I think that the biggest thing that I was confused by in his video is that when he would do his standing behind in front of a green screen thing, his pictures had a ton of middle grade and a ton of older young adult, but there was no Twilight. And I feel like if you're gonna have a discourse on young adult as a whole, you're doing yourself a disservice by not including Twilight, because there is a reason why there is a shit ton of romance in young adult right now, and I personally will say that I owe it completely to Twilight. Now, I don't really want to go into depth on Twilight because I do plan on doing a pretty in-depth video for you guys about why I don't think we should have another Twilight book personally in the year 2020.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
But that is something that I do want to touch on in this video, because if you're not a YA reader, you may not know that romance is something that really foundationally showed up in the young adult section after Twilight. Paranormal romance was everywhere. And I do think that you can see Harry Potter and Twilight both having an effect on our now current young adult section, because like Daniel said in his video, the audience for young adult hasn't changed. It's still the kids that read Harry Potter when it came out, and it's just aged with them. So we can see things like Harry Potter, Twilight, and now this mess. And if you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. Basically, I do believe that young adult is an evolving marketing genre, as what Daniel said, but I do think that there are some caveats that we have to put on it, because I feel like young adult is looked down upon because of the high amount of romance and who it is directed to, namely younger women. Now, if I want to go into Six of Crows, I want to talk about my experience with adult fantasy. Now, I was a huge young adult reader when I was in middle school through pretty much the end of my high school career. I absolutely loved the Shadowhunter books, the Twilight series, things like that of that nature. I devoured them. But then around my senior year of high school is when I started going to college, and I actually read all of the Game of Thrones books like when the first season was airing. I inhaled them. The writing style is much more complex. It's much more violent. It definitely has a different sense of urgency than my interest in YA was at that point, if that makes any sense. And so when I tried reading YA after reading Game of Thrones, I couldn't fucking do it. I could not do it. I could not. I tried reading The Diviners, and I do like the way that The Diviners is written now, but then I was like, I can't do it. I don't have any fucks for this series right now. I don't want to read this. But then it took me being a lead for the YA section in my store to get back into reading young adult fantasy. And namely, A Court of Thorns and Roses is how I got in, because that book isn't necessarily written just for younger people. It's also written for my demographic. I was well within the age range for that book, and then the later books, because it was designed specifically to keep me as a reader entranced in the story, and I think that's what Six of Crows is doing as well. Six of Crows has heroes that have morally gray attributes, but at the deepest part, they are a good character, a la Harry Potter, and then there are the will they won't they tensions of those romances a la Twilight. And I loved the world building. It was really, really fun, and I enjoyed so much of it. And it was a fast read for me because, once again, I had been reading more adult fantasies, and since this book is geared for younger understanding readers, it was just a quick read. I loved it, thoroughly enjoyed it. But going off from that, I actually ended up reading Lies of Locke Lamora, which I know is a book that I think that Daniel Green enjoyed. I read that based on the premise that it was similar to Six of Crows. I read that and did not like it at the time because I had just got into reading young adult again. And for a book that is supposedly very similar to Six of Crows, its characters were what I did not appreciate. The world was interesting, the plot was complex, but I could not get along with the characters. If you've read Six of Crows and you enjoyed it, you probably have what I would consider like a Six of Crows bias. Sorry to the K-pop stans, I'm just gonna go ahead and steal that from you. So if you have read Six of Crows, you probably have a character that you stan hands down, and Nina Zanik was that for me. I absolutely loved her story, and I really, really enjoyed following her. Whereas with Lies of Locke Lamora, I couldn't connect with any of the characters because I didn't see myself in any of them because a lot of them were men. And to the extent that there was one female character that was talked about heavily, but she was never on the page. She was mentioned as this really interesting character, but she never shows up, and that blue-balled me to no end. Now, I would say that if I read it now, I would probably enjoy it more. I definitely enjoy adult fantasy more than I enjoy young adult, but that particular character element would really still drive me nuts because I don't like female characters being talked about as if they're badass, but then not shown that they're badass, especially if they're not on the fucking page, like not in the room. Like they can be mentioned, but not on, you know what I'm saying. I do think that it's an interesting element to want to have more morally gray or anti-hero characters, but I do think that there is a reason why we don't see that as much because A, younger people may not understand the complexities or may not enjoy them like I did with Artemis Fowl. And so in this instance, I do feel like there are elements of this particular discourse that are valid on both sides, And I do think that there are several very, very dark YA books out there that handle really extreme topics. But I don't honestly think that if you were an adult reader, you are going to get the same thing out of a young adult book. That does not mean young adult is bad. It just means that it's not potentially for you. And honestly, right now, I have not been getting along with young adult because of the poorly constructed romances that have been churning out for the last several years. The big thing when I was a bookseller is that young adult has been sliding in markets because there has not been a resurgence from a series that has taken off. Like there's Sarah J. Maas, there's Cassandra Clare, there's these really big names, but we haven't had a huge young adult series.
They ask you how you are, you just...
Since the Hunger Games, pretty much. And so that's why we can see like Court of Thorns and Roses and the Shadowhunter Chronicles aging up with the audience that still likes that type of story. And that's why it was interesting to me that there wasn't really any current young adult books featured in these videos. And I do understand why Six of Crows was not something that a mainly adult fantasy reader would enjoy, specifically because it is designed for the audience that enjoyed not only Harry Potter, but Twilight as well. Doesn't mean you have to have read either to enjoy Six of Crows, but I just feel like that's the combination that was missing here in this discourse. Not saying that anybody's wrong, just saying that this is potentially what was left out of this conversation, basically. Now, I do want to say, if you're attacking people on Twitter for people's opinions, you are in fact the asshole. Just saying. Now, I don't know if this is gonna be a good video or not. I feel like I've ranted enough. But basically, I would say that there are gems in young adult. Don't automatically say that young adult is bad. And also, there's a difference between middle grade and young adult. And if you're gonna talk about young adult, you have to take into account what Twilight did to that genre. Know what I'm saying? Know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I will definitely be doing, I think, a video on Twilight specifically and why I think that it has caused the young adult genre to have a negative connotation, and why even though people who have not read young adult to any extent still think that there is a lack of eloquently written young adult. That's a whole other video. I think I've rambled on enough. I honestly don't know if you guys are gonna like this, but that's pretty much all the shit that I post right now. So I'm gonna go now, guys. Like, subscribe, all the good stuff. Bye!